Okay. I think it's a really cool topic. So I'm keen to stick with that topic for another question. Sure. In this digital space, these so-called smart features can narrow options too early. And I'm wondering which common digital checklist features do you think risk reducing resilient capacities, even if they maybe improve consistency?
I think, of course, for example, if you think about actually AI technology applied to digital checklists, for example, and then the AI will give you the best answer, to the best of the knowledge or the database they have access to, that becomes a problem. Now, if you use AI to expand your capabilities in terms of understanding the problem or the situation, then I think actually there's a better chance. People should still be the ones actually making the calls, but we can use the technology to enhance their capabilities of diagnosing problems or assessing the situation, or even actually responses. So these are some options you can choose. There are pros and cons, and the decision is ultimately from you.
In one of your papers, you talk about a resilience brittleness framework, arguing that we should analyze both strengths and weaknesses. And how do you tell when resilience or the capacities for resilience is a genuine strength versus a workaround that hides brittleness?
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate around these, resilience and brittleness. So I did a study in a charter company, and they were showing a lot of resilience, indications of resilience, but most of the situations were because of the financial constraints they had. So, they couldn't replace particular devices in the aircraft. And because of that, they had to find workarounds actually to work with the technology wasn't working actually as intended. How much of these actually is a sign of resilience, or is it brittleness, or we're going to create actually opportunities for people to mess it up? And in fact, actually many of the situations uncovered during my research show that people were actually in dangerous situations because of the workarounds, because of the technology wasn't actually available, because of financial constraints. So I think we needed more discussions around the idea of resilience in terms of being put in place some adaptations that actually could be avoided because of other, production or financial constraints. So we can't just relied on adaptive capacity all the time to fix things that you could actually, invest more money or resources to get it right.
So this one's a bit off the cuff, but Bob Wares, he wrote a bit about this tragedy of adaptability, that we come to rely on adaptive capacity of people so much that we burn them out. We're not fixing core issues. I'm curious whether you think that some of these underlying philosophies or principles in the new view in HOP might actually be somewhat of a blind spot, that we extol the virtues of people's capacities to adapt so much that maybe we under-prioritize the core issues.
Yeah, I agree. It's a conversation we must have, right? So it's not actually only Wares, but also mobility also questions whether resilience is the same as safety, right? So you rely so much on people to adapt, given the flaws of the system or the organization, that now you don't know whether these adaptations are actually safe. I agree. I think we should start a conversation. So look, we can't just rely 100% on people to adapt all the time, even if the situation can be fixed, or there is a actual kind of a way to fix the system or actually improve the quality of the delivery or the process. I think, and also the other thing is, not all adaptations are safe, because they might reveal situations which actually isn't very unsafe to continue to do that thing, but because of the pressure of production and quality, you have to keep going. I've seen actually firsthand, that people were trying to adapt and doing their best, and despite actually even the best of their efforts, they were actually putting themselves in very risky situations. But at the same time, we also agree that just having a formal structure is not enough to guarantee safety. So I think the $1 million question is, how will you manage both? So what are kind of these adaptations that we should actually pay attention more, and actually even help people to adapt, given the right conditions or the tools for that to happen, and which ones we don't want to have because we have to actually fix the formal structure or the organization itself. It's a question still. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody knows the answer yet, but I think definitely would be a great starting point to have conversations with the whole community and the industry as well, to see which ones actually we should prioritize.
Yeah, I think that's a really honest, fair assessment of the sort of the state of the evidence around it. So maybe we could summarize that by, it's still an open question, but maybe not valorizing the positive or negative capabilities, but at least surfacing those workarounds. I think that's probably a good starting point. Is we don't have to do any sort of post hoc analysis whether it's right or wrong, but we need to understand it so we can better manage it, maybe.
I agree. Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, last two questions I have. Because resilient capacities can be found anywhere in a socio-technical system, including in informal practices and workarounds, as much as potentially the formal processes, or at least the application of them, how do we surface informal adaptations for learning without converting them into these really formalized, mechanistic, but potentially brittle rules? Reading that out loud, that's quite a big question. So you're welcome just to take a bite out of it.
Even just 1 second, let me think. Cool. Yeah, I think it's not just about formalizing certain adaptations or situations that happen. I think it's creating an environment where people feel comfortable to share their experiences without being or fearing being sanctioned or punished. I feel like you asked actually at the beginning, what is the definition of safety? What is my definition of safety? And I think in addition to what I said in terms of feeling, is also organizations in which the information flows well. So you are open to hear bad news all the time without actually trying to get people out of your company. And I think that's also a possibility here. So information flows and you actually know exactly how people are doing things or adapting in the problems they're facing. I think that can give companies a better chance to address those problems. Because research is showing actually the problem is not just the adaptation or the formal system, it's also knowing that things are happening the way they're happening in your company. And based on my experiences, the safest companies that I've had the privilege to work with, they are the ones that people really, really express their concerns all the time. And the managers and executives, actually, they address those concerns seriously, not just like brushing them off, or they say that's the problem because people are whinging all the time. We are whinging all the time, but certain times are more important than others. But being aware of the problems and addressing them properly, even though if they're to address the problems, actually doing nothing or being just aware or acknowledging, I think that's a way to build capacity and resilient systems.
Last question. In your 2011 safety management system study, you draw on the resilience engineering theory and you pushed for audits to reveal adaptive capacity and not just evaluating documents and formalized things. So what would you change in a typical audit so it better exposes this sort of gap in the brittleness?
I get this question all the time. So I read actually a fascinating paper. I think the title is "The Doctor Was Rude and the Toilet Was Dirty." The power of weak signals for audits in healthcare. If you're not wrong, actually, that's the title. The idea of weak signals is something unexplored. And basically the idea is it's what we call a significant route. So you get there, you just talk to people, normal day, you spend the time, and then you get a feeling that maybe something wrong, maybe there is nothing wrong, even though your checklist may show that something wrong, or maybe there is something wrong, even though your checklist is showing that nothing is wrong. So the idea of relying on people's perception of the environment, I think that's a very powerful thing that we haven't explored as a possibility or an additional tool for audits.
So just continuing on that theme then, it seems like you're sort of advocating for more of a focus on the daily work, understanding the things that people do, what they understand.
Exactly. And also when your auditors, for example, or people are coming to a company, even though despite the checklist saying that everything's fine, but you get a sense that something may not be going well, can help you to filter what you have to do and then focus more resources and attention to that particular unit or division or operation or company, so you can actually try to understand what's happening there. That actually happened informally to me when I was working for a particular company. So we had these auditors from the regulator. They came, it was like, well, you guys comply with everything, you're doing an amazing job, you have all these procedures and the process and manuals, but getting a sense that something is quite off. Can you tell me exactly what's happening here? And it was an amazing conversation, because what happened was they came actually as a way to help us to address some of the problems we were experiencing. And none of the problems were actually captured by the checklist. And I adopted actually the same thing at Griffith as well. So we used to have a training partner, a flight training partner. And one of the program director of the program was basically going there and talking to people. No normal day, nothing special. You don't have to embellish your house for that particular audit. It was a normal conversation as every, other week actually we were going there. And that was actually very reassuring to me, because everything was going well. If the program director would come and say, look, there's something off here happening, I would pay my attention. And of course, we got to divert attention and resources, because I think that's the objective of audit, is to filter what are the things that actually may not going well, that we can actually dedicate more time and attention and effort to help actually or improve the quality. But the checklists, they're limited, right? So they're going to be able to capture just what actually it's supposed to capture. And then the second part, which is people's, perception, or even training people, very specialized people, I think we should rely more on that one. It's a number of times actually I saw some colleagues auditing operations, and they said, look, the checklist is fabulous. Everything's is green. But there's something happening that I can't explain. I don't have the vocabulary to explain. We should be paying attention more to that operation or to that group or that division, because something is not happening. Something is happening there. Not quite, I don't know why, but it's not actually well. But we can't, because we're just relying on checklists. So I think that would be like a good way to expand the capability of the audits. I think audits are great tools if they're used in the right way.
Excellent. So really appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to throw out there to the floor that I haven't covered, or you want to expand on before we wrap it up?
Just fact check me on the title of the paper.
I'll check that.
Out is the weak signal. I don't think that's the right title, but that one is really good. Of course, it was carried out there was conducting in Scandinavia, which is a slightly different environment and society than other countries. But I think it is a great example of how different theories from different areas can help actually us in safety as well. So
excellent. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. That was fascinating.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thank you.